Welcome into this week's episode of Three True Values. I'm your host, James Fletcher, and we are here once again to talk all things college basketball. It is officially March. That means the madness has begun. We've got mid major conference tournaments happening across the country. We're going to punch an automatic bid into the NCAA tournament this weekend. We'll have a couple of those and then get into next weekend's full conference tournament slate, the regular season for the high major, and a couple of the mid majors that do continue their regular season schedule. This will be the final weekend. So we're seeing the last round of games for most of these teams before they move into postseason mode. We've also got a couple of games tonight scheduled. Michigan State and Michigan among the teams that still have two games left on their schedule, but will be wrapping things up by Sunday. And then it's all about bracketology from there. Through Selection Sunday, we will have you covered. We will have the latest for you on what is going on, how the bubble is shifting each day based on the results. We know that each time there's a bid stealer in play, it's going to completely shatter what the bubble looks like. And so we'll keep you up to date on all of those situations over at On Three. I will have fresh bracketology updates each and every morning, and they will be updated throughout the day as we move through the rest of this season into Selection Sunday. You're not going to want to miss that. Also have automatic bid trackers going up there as well. We'll have Bubble Watch for you still coming next week. So a lot to prepare for, a lot to talk about here on today's show. In the opening segment, we're going to talk about that bubble. There's a lot of teams in play. There's a lot going on. Who is moving up? Who is moving down? What do we do with Miami, Ohio if, there's a big if here because they are undefeated to this point, if they don't get the automatic bid from the MAC? What do we do with them? Are they a bubble team? Should we put them in over some of these high major contenders that have had really middling seasons? They're on the bottom half of their conference standings. What do we make of that? How do we compare those two things? We'll talk about that here in the first segment. And then in the second segment, we're going to talk about Florida and UConn, the two teams that are in play for the final one seed spot, because three of them already locked out. Those teams could lose out. They would still be one seeds by the time we get to Selection Sunday, but there's one up for grabs. UConn currently holds on to it, thanks in large part to a head-to-head win over the Gators. We'll talk about what Florida could potentially do that would change things there. And in the final segment, we're just going to wrap things up. We're going to put a bow on it. We'll talk you through some of the conference championships that you will be seeing before the next time that we speak. Before any of that, though, let's go ahead and let's get into it. Let's talk about the bubble, because it is the biggest topic in college basketball this time of year. And we've got some really interesting cases being made across the country. Right now, the last four in is an interesting debate. We saw New Mexico take a recent loss. SMU remains on a losing skid. Auburn has had so many struggles. Indiana finally gets things going back in the right direction during the midweek slate. So how do we stack all of these things up? I think that this is really best case scenario for, first of all, Ohio State, who did not have the quad one wins that you wanted on a resume. I still had them in the field. That goes back in large part to what we saw last year with North Carolina. Yes, they did not have the quad one wins to stack up, but when you include quad two, they had a big chunk of those wins. And paired with solid analytics that placed them above the other teams, I believed that Ohio State would be in the field. They don't have to worry too much about that now, though, because they've picked up a couple of quad one wins here down the stretch of the regular season. They're up onto the 10 seed line as things stand right now. But we talk about these other teams that are struggling to the finish line. SMU is one that's going to be really interesting to follow. I think they still have enough cushion. I do believe that they're going to get there regardless. I think they're kind of where the cutoff should be for teams that feel solidly in the field. You look at Santa Clara, they're going to be a really interesting one here because they're into their conference tournament play. They will not play, though, until the semifinals. That's the way, or excuse me, the quarterfinals, when they will face a team from the West Coast Conference. If they win, they go into a game against St. Mary's. Now, a loss against St. Mary's, a team currently projected on the 6 seed line, would not really ding your resume. But without multiple opportunities going forward into the conference schedule that these other teams on the bubble could potentially have, what does that do for their bubble case? Do they start to slip? I think that they're pretty solidly in the field, but I don't think it's a home run just because the West Coast Conference has not historically been one of the multi bid leagues beyond two. We know Gonzaga and St. Mary's often are in the NCAA tournament field, but beyond that, it's been a struggle to get whether it's Santa Clara in their best years, San Francisco when they have up seasons as well. It has happened. I think that this year it should happen, but we're going to have to sweat it out until Selection Sunday. New Mexico is an interesting one. They really shot themselves in the foot with a loss against Colorado State. Colorado State, which, by the way, under Ali Farouk continuing the Nico Medved tradition of getting red hot down the stretch of February and into March, they're a team to look out for as a serious bid stealing candidate. They are on a massive win streak. They are just mowing down competition in the Mountain West, including teams that are on the bubble. Now, if Colorado State is not able to get into bid stealer conversations, particularly if Utah State ends up winning that automatic bid, it could be a doomsday scenario for the Mountain West, which had an incredible season last year, getting quite a few names into the NCAA tournament. It could go the wrong way for them this time around, as they've seen some of their teams just beat up on each other. San Diego State has taken some losses. They've fallen down the pecking order. They look like they're really on the outside looking in, would need to probably win the conference tournament to get in at this point, the way that things stand. New Mexico does some real damage. They're going to be on the outside looking in now. They're going to really have to push and find somewhere to make up ground if they are going to make their way into the NCAA tournament here in these final few days. So, what do we do with New Mexico? I think right now you put them to the side. I think that you wait for what happens this weekend, because if they lose, then they really go into that San Diego State conversation of off the bubble. We're not really going to worry until you get to probably at least the Mountain West championship game. That is really the only way that you could push your way back up into this. But if they can pick up a win, they're still on the fringe there. They're still in that conversation for that one of those final spots in the field. And so I think that it's going to come down to comparisons. Do we look at New Mexico with a better overall record, but again, they're not coming into this postseason hot. They're not on a win streak. Or do you go with one of these Auburns, Indianas, Cincinnati's that are much closer to 500 in their overall record, but have faced tougher competition, have had some results here and there. They've had some good resume builders throughout the course of the season, just not consistently. And that brings us to the Auburn and Indiana conversation. Auburn is still falling. They get a win in the midweek schedule. They beat LSU. They're going to have to face Alabama to close out the regular season. I think that the most likely outcome is that they lose 2 games here down the stretch. That would all but eliminate them from contention for an NCAA tournament spot. But if they could pull an upset against Alabama, that would get them right back in the mix. If they could then win a game or two in the SEC tournament, I think that could actually lock them into the field if they were able to make a little mini run towards the weekend. Similar situation for Indiana here. If they can get a win on the weekend, I think they're right in the mix for this. They would probably need one win at least in the Big Ten tournament to really make things serious for them in those final spots. But the really interesting one, the one that I can't talk about enough here, is Cincinnati. Cincinnati really was dead in the water just a few weeks ago. Even their coach, emotional after a loss, detailing how things just had not gone their way. He's not sure what's wrong, but he's going to keep fighting. and they have continued to fight. Really, one of the most impressive closes to the regular season that we've seen from Cincinnati. They've gotten themselves above 500. They've added some real resume boosting wins. They are firmly in the mix now. Now, the analytics are going to hold them back. They need to improve their wins above the bubble. They need that number to keep going up. They need their net ranking to continue to rise. These are the things that are going to really be the determining factor for Cincinnati as we get into the final days, whether or not I will project them to land in the NCAA tournament field. Because I do think that of these teams that we've mentioned here, New Mexico, Auburn, Indiana, I think Cincinnati is more deserving today than any of those teams. But we do have to look at the overall resume. And the overall resume says analytically, the other teams have been better throughout the course of the season. Now, if we isolated it to recent results, Cincinnati would blow them out of the water. But you can't do that entirely. You can make that part of your discussion when you debate these teams, but the whole body of work does have to matter. So it's going to be interesting to see, can they win a couple of games in this conference tournament? Can they close the regular season with another win? That would be big for them. I think that they still are well within reach of the bubble here and could be the most interesting team to debate entering Selection Sunday. Before we leave this segment, though, we've got to talk about Miami, Ohio. They have been the topic of discussion across college basketball. As we know, Bruce Pearl made headlines saying that they need to win their conference tournament to make it into the NCAA tournament field. We've seen people snap back at that. We've seen Bruce Pearl respond there. Obviously, an extenuating circumstance with his son coaching at Auburn. The fact that Auburn is on the bubble, we just talked about them in their case, the struggles that they've been going through down the stretch. And so they probably need a little bit of help to get into the field at this point. Well, Miami, Ohio is not where they're going to get that help, unfortunately, for Bruce Pearl and his son. Miami, Ohio is one win away from locking themselves in to the NCAA tournament. The selection committee is simply not going to leave an undefeated regular season team out of the field because they would only have one loss on their resume. That loss would come in conference tournament play in a single elimination day after day event. They would also still rank well above any of the other teams on the bubble when we talk about WAB, the wins above bubble. That is an important metric that the committee has leaned on over these last couple of seasons. It has become one of the best determining factors of whether a team is in NCAA tournament contention, and theirs is significantly above the rest. They're sitting above a 3 right now in terms of the metric that ranks inside the top 30. Strength of record is also in the top 30. This is a team that, yes, they faced a weak schedule, but they've won every game. And that's difficult to do, even if you're the best team in college basketball. Duke and Michigan, Arizona, they all have 2 losses. We've seen what they can do to the average college basketball team. They all have taken losses. Michigan has a quad 2 loss, for that matter. It is very difficult to go undefeated through the regular season. And if you look at the analytic data, what it will tell you is that none of these teams that we have talked about, New Mexico, Santa Clara, Auburn, Indiana, Cincinnati, none of them would be expected to have the same record as Miami, Ohio, facing that schedule. None of them would project to go undefeated through the regular season based on the results that they've had to this point this year. So, according to the computers, Miami, Ohio has overachieved what we could expect even those teams to do in the same situation. They should be in the NCAA tournament. They will be in the NCAA tournament if they win this final regular season game. Of course, if they win the conference tournament, after losing the final regular season game, they'll also be in. 2 losses is where it gets really dangerous for them. I don't think it entirely rules them out because their WAB will still be relatively high. Taking 2 losses is not going to completely kill their resume, but it will make it a very interesting debate. They're going to be very closely compared to the Auburns, the Indianas that are in the running for that final spot. We will see because on Friday we will get a pretty definitive answer. If they win that game, they will be into the NCAA tournament. You will not really have to worry much about the potential for them to miss out. When we come back on the other side, we're going to talk about this one seed debate. We've talked about the bubble, now back up to the top of the bracket. We'll talk about Florida and UConn next, right here on Three True Values. Welcome back in here on Three True Values. I'm yours, James Fletcher, and we are continuing bracketology talk into this second segment. We've got Florida and UConn battling it out for that final one seed spot in the field. We know the top three: Duke, Michigan, and Arizona, each with two losses, each with an impressive amount of quad one wins under their belt. We are going to see them on the one seed line. Now, not necessarily locked into that order, not necessarily locked into being the top three. All depends on the results over this weekend and then into the conference tournament a little bit. I think that they've got enough cushion that unless it's a bad loss, a quad three, quad two, like lower quad two loss, I don't think that they're falling into that fourth position. But it's not officially locked in yet. They're likely to be the top three seeds. And then if one doesn't win their conference tournament, could end up being that third team. Obviously, we know the order that they're in now is likely the order they would land in if they all won their postseason tournaments. But the final one seed spot is not officially locked in. UConn currently holds it. They have pole position because of a head to head result against Florida earlier this season. Now, there's two things about that head-to-head result that are really interesting. One is that head-to-head is not an official determining factor for the committee. They can still rank Florida ahead of the Huskies here. There's no real locked in, set in stone determining factor that they have to place one team above the other if they have an advantage of playing each other. However, what is going to be very interesting here is that UConn has a better record overall than Florida. Only 3 losses on the season. Florida has 6. So if both teams take a loss from here on out, UConn with a head-to-head advantage, with a better record, they're going to get the nod. They are going to be that fourth one seed team. They've also got right now a better WOB than Florida. Florida a little bit higher in most of the other analytics. They've got more quad one wins to this point. But UConn, with that head to head as part of this debate, I think if both teams lose, still takes the advantage. No matter where in their conference tournament each team loses, I think UConn probably has the one seed there. Now, where things get interesting, if either team takes a loss and the other one goes on to win their conference tournament, that team will be the final one seed. If it is Florida who wins the SEC, UConn takes a loss, let's just say to St. John's. Florida will get that one seed spot. Yes, they will have a worse overall record, 6 losses to 4 losses, and lack the head to head result. However, they will hold significantly more quad one wins. On a neutral floor, going through that SEC tournament, they'll probably pick up 3 quad one wins. Could be 2, but probably 3 quad one wins. UConn, over the course of the Big East tournament, will likely have 1, maybe 2 quad one opportunities. So, if UConn, which already is trailing Florida in quad one wins, not just by 1 or 2, like there's a gap. If they go through the Big East tournament, don't pick up or only pick up 1 quad one win, Florida goes out, picks up 3 more, plus the result this weekend. That creates a real gap in the resumes. Florida has a significantly more impressive outcome. an outcome that is worth more than the 2 wins, clearly. Now, where it gets really interesting is if both teams go on to win their conference tournament. This has sparked some debate here whether or not Florida could surpass UConn as the SEC champions if UConn also wins out. There'd be 3 wins between the two of them. So what you would have to determine, we talked about the separation in quad one wins that we would still have in that scenario. UConn would be slightly closer, likely, but not all the way there. Florida would still open up the gap even further from where it is today in quad one wins. So as we continue to debate these teams, the head-to-head is going to still matter. That's why UConn would be in the debate at that point. But we have to determine, is the amount of quad one wins that Florida has more valuable to their resume than a one head-to-head result from the non-conference schedule? And I think that can become part of this. It'd be a very interesting case study here. Does the selection committee say, yes, there is a head-to-head result between these two? UConn won, got a slight edge in that win. It was not a blowout, close game. UConn won, they have an advantage there. But does the committee feel that this Florida team today is different? Do they feel that they have improved, that they are a better team? Does the committee feel that if they put these two teams on the floor against each other, neutral site today, that Florida would be a substantial favorite? Favored by more points than they lost by against UConn in that matchup early in the season. How do they weigh that? Because I believe that is likely true. I think that Florida has looked more impressive down the stretch of this season. So there's a lot of moving parts that are going to go into this. I think that the safe thing to do if you're the selection committee would be to keep UConn in that final spot. But I can also definitely see a scenario where they do lean Florida on Selection Sunday. I don't think that's out of the realm at all. I think it will also depend on the way these results happen. Does UConn just skate by to a conference championship? Do they have 2 really down to the wire wins and Florida runs the table, wins by 20 every game? That changes things. It'll change things in the analytics. It'll change things with the eye test. It will make that debate we were just talking about open up even further. Is Florida just so dominant we can't leave them off of the 1 seed line? That could become a conversation. It could elevate them onto the 1 seed line here. We've got a little over a week to settle all of that. It will likely resolve itself. Let's be honest here. The odds that we get all of the conference champions just from the top of college basketball, if we do, expect chalk in the NCAA tournament. I'll tell you that. If we get Duke, Michigan, Arizona, Florida, and UConn winning the high major conference tournaments, go ahead and make a really chalky bracket once it is revealed. Because if those teams have created that much separation from the field, well, they're probably going to make deep runs into the NCAA tournament. When we come back on the other side, we will close out today's show, get you ready for the weekend as we finish the regular season and start punching bids into the NCAA tournament. Welcome back in here as we close out today's show. Not doing a big third segment here. We got through the bubble conversation. We talked about the 1 seed teams in the mix there, how that can all shake out down the stretch of this season. Just want to spend this third segment giving you guys an update, following along what the schedule looks like here over the next couple of weeks. On Tuesday, rather than doing an NBA draft show, rather than talking about the recruiting cycle, we're going to take a break. We're going to talk more about bracketology because that is, of course, the big driving force, the big conversation right now. We will preview conference tournaments. That's what we're going to do on Tuesday. We will be breaking down all of these high major conference tournaments that are set to get underway starting next week. So Tuesday, you're going to want to catch that. Games, of course, will start for some of those conference tournaments on Tuesday night. So make sure you listen in time for whatever conference tournaments you do care about. The rest will you typically start on Wednesday. We'll see a lot more action start to pick up. And then Thursday's show. Thursday's show will be a typical show. We're going to probably talk a lot of bracketology. If there's any big news out there, any early eliminations from conference tournaments, we'll be breaking that down throughout the course of that show. And then on Selection Sunday, we are going to do a reaction show. So that will be out Sunday night. We will be taking questions. So if you have any questions as the bracket is revealed, please shoot those to me on Twitter, wherever you can reach me. Please do so. Ask those questions. We'll get those lined up. We'll talk about the bracket and where things stand. Of course, I will be posting bracketology updates each day at On3. You're going to want to follow along with that through the end of Selection Sunday. After that, we will kind of regroup. And then on Tuesday, again, we're going to take a pause from NBA draft talk, take a pause from recruiting talk. We're going to get you ready for the NCAA tournament. On Tuesday, we will be doing bracket picks. We're going to break down the best paths towards the NCAA tournament. We'll do all of that right here on 3 True Values. You're not going to want to miss it. So like, subscribe, whatever else you got to do for this algorithm, please go ahead and do it. Share the word with your friends who follow college basketball, who are just getting into it for March Madness. We're going to give them some insight here on these teams. We're going to provide you with really some nice stuff to have if you're entering your office bracket pool. You might get some inside tips here on the best way to go about filling out your bracket, the teams that could make a deep run into the NCAA tournament. Check all of that out right here on 3 True Values. Follow my work with On3, and we will see you next week with more college basketball news.